What the city is talking about. This is Montreal Now on News Talk Radio, CJAD 800.
Good evening, Dan Delmar, Justine McIntyre in for Aaron, and time for James MENNIE of the Montreal Gazette. Hey, James.
Hello, guys. Look out. There's a twister coming.
Yeah, climate change. Let's start there. Twisters in Brossard. Jasper, I mean, who knows what the damage is going to be like there.
The thing is, I love it, though. My buddy Jason Magro over the Gazette, he's doing the story on the Brossard tornado. He's got a great line over at MontrealGazette.com. He's talking to a guy who goes, you don't expect Brossard and tornado in the same sentence.
No,
and he's 100% right, but I'll tell you something else. What you really don't expect is to hear the words Brossard, Portneuf, and St. Jerome and tornado in the same sentence, because that's what happened. And when anyone who knows the geography of this place is, we're not talking about a localized area where you say, oh, it was a very bad, it was a remarkable thing. This is like a huge piece of real estate. This was a major system with extreme consequences. I don't know where you guys were when it was coming down. I mean, me between 6 and 7 was crazy. The skies have been gray around, the whole day around my neighborhood, but then they turned jet black. And I thought, when I heard reports about damage, I thought it was a microburst before it was a tornado. But in fact, Environment Canada was surprised to discover that what happened in Brossard was a tornado. They had put in a warning for Lachute, which to a certain extent is a usual suspect for that kind of phenomenon. But, you're listening to all this, and you're looking at these heartbreaking images out of Jasper, which is this postcard community, and there's a lot of people in this country, across this country, who have been there, who've been touched by the beauty of the place, whose hearts are being broken by the sight of it literally burning to death. And, okay, fine. I don't want to get into the whole debate about climate change. As far as I'm concerned, it's not a debate. But when we talk about the hot air that's being expelled in this country and in others, about getting ready, about the changeover, about what's happening, I don't get the impression that we're seeing much more other than a lot of proper rhetoric, whether it's from, Justin Trudeau or Francois Legault or anyone in between. I don't get, we're supposed to have this 2030 transition to electric vehicles. Don't hold your breath, kids, because I'm not seeing that infrastructure being set up in any way, shape, or form. And you really have to wonder, the question now isn't, are these things going to happen? They are going to happen. But the question is, how much more frequently will they occur? And how much more extreme will they be? As I say, three tornadoes in one evening over a large swath of territory. I remember, my God, I've been in this business for more than 4 decades. I think I've covered 2 tornadoes in Quebec in the entirety of my career, and they were separated by like a 15-year gap, both around the South Shore in widely separate parts, and they weren't that big a deal. But here we're seeing, 3 events in the same time period. It really is scary. You don't have to run around and be like an alarmist. You're just looking at the images from these 3 places. Look at the images from Jasper, and you've got to tell yourself, okay, enough with the arguing, enough with just clutching pearls. You got to have a plan, because if only a plan for damage control. Never mind turning it around, just to deal with this issue. And it's so funny because there was a great piece by Canadian Press today talking about this recent Premier's Conference where they're talking about the housing crisis and the economy. But what the one thing they share across the board is the need to be able to either retrofit or prepare their provinces, their communities for weather that is unlike anything we've ever seen, and weather that's going to be unlike anything we've ever seen for the foreseeable future. And I find that's more scary than any speculative science fiction film. I'm getting a little worried about the reality that's sort of planting itself right in front of us on an almost daily basis.
You're absolutely right. And in fact, we do know that it's going to get a lot worse because we have those IPCC reports coming out, the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, telling us exactly, giving us an exact forecast of what to expect. And we know that with every half degree of warming that happens, the intensity just increases exponentially, the intensity of these kinds of weather events. Dan and I were noticing earlier, we were noting that Danielle Smith was addressing Albertans about the the continuing situation with wildfires there, and we saw her shed a tear or two. But I'm wondering if tears are enough, or if there's going to be actual policy change. And as you said, whether it's Alberta or Quebec or Ontario, all of the premiers should be getting together to talk about this. This should be top of mind, really, top of their list.
And it's not really the kind of thing where you can say, well, it's not going to affect me. I remember, and I'm sure a lot of our listeners remember, especially those living out in the West End, a few years back, we had a microburst that essentially occurred smack over whether, there's always an argument if you want to call it Girard Park or NDG Park.
Right.
But the park on Sherbrooke at Marseille, and it came down there like an Old Testament act of God. It flattened trees. It didn't last for more than 10 or 11 minutes. But when you walked in there, and it was raining sideways, I just lived up the street from there when it happened. I actually did a remote for you guys when in the aftermath. It was so unreal looking at these very mature trees that have been snapped like twigs. Miraculously, nobody got hurt. Even the flashing on the roof of the old Cinema 5 had been taken off and deposited 2 blocks away. But this is what I'm talking about. It's stuff that comes out of nowhere that has the potential for tremendous damage, and it is something that you can absolutely not predict.
In the U.S. last night, Joe Biden had a brief and dignified address.
What do you think about it?
Nice and short.
Did he sound okay to you?
I mean, he was reading. He was reading from a teleprompter and
carefully
he was,
scripted.
Yeah, carefully scripted.
Yeah, very carefully scripted. But it was almost as if he was. And I was going to say, my God, if he sounds more weak than I've ever heard him.
Yeah, he did.
But it's almost as if he had been. The deal was remain restrained. Don't. Because even like last Friday, he wasn't sounding like that when he said he'd be on the campaign trail. And of course, I don't want to engage in all the conspiracy theories and whatever. There's a lot of people out there, I think, right now who are misconstruing the whole thing. I don't know what you guys are seeing. I see way too many people down the States who are always saying this election is over. Kamala Harris is the next president of the United States. Folks, sit down, calm down, take a deep breath. It's a long way between now and November. But I have to tell you, it was kind of, and I'm sorry, I should be able to think of a good English word, but the only word that came into my mind watching them last night was triste. It was a guy who has, he's no Fabergé egg. He's rough and tumble. He's, politically speaking, he's got blood on his hands. But man, just to see him to sort of have to walk away from it all. Saying all the right things and then looking as if, maybe he'd rather not be doing this. It was, I heard it described as a love letter. I guess it was a love letter. I'm just wondering, though, in this day and age and this idea, this fatally short attention span the American public, indeed the North American public has these days, whether it will be remembered beyond this weekend and whether the lesson I think that's taught by the experience of Joe Biden is going to resonate in American politics or indeed our own politics. As in politics as in life, knowing when to leave is perhaps the best quality you can have.
James MENNIE of the Montreal Gazette will do one more for the summer tomorrow.
Absolutely. À demain.